Ouais, il faudrait que je fasse un test.
We will just give it a couple more minutes for a few more participants to join us. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. We're most pleased that you can join us for the first of what I'm sure is going to be a fantastic series of webinars. And we'll be starting in just a few more minutes. Thank you so much.
Une feuille de bronze, une feuille de
Well, we might start now. Thank you all for joining us. It's wonderful to have you here. So good afternoon and good morning. Welcome to the first of the International Solar Alliance's webinar series for small island developing states. Solar, building a brighter future. Today's webinar will cover the role of microgrids supporting resilience in Pacific Island countries. And we are absolutely delighted to have two experts with us today to present to you. Mr. Solomone Fifita, Manager of the Pacific Centre for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, and Mr. Bruno Gaidon from the French National Institute of Solar Energy. Before they begin, I'll take the liberty of briefly introducing the International Solar Alliance for those who may be less familiar with us and with our work. The International Solar Alliance is a growing international organisation of 75 member countries. Of these, 26, over a third, are small island developing states, and of those, 9 are Pacific Island countries. We support governments around the world to improve energy access and security. We do this by promoting solar energy as a sustainable, affordable, and resilient way to transition to a carbon neutral future. Our mission is to unlock $1 trillion of investment by 2030 by reducing the cost of technology and its financing and increasing the skills of people working in the industry. To do so, we support governments to make their energy legislation and policies solar friendly through analytics and advocacy for all. We set standards and norms for solar and strengthen solar ecosystems in all developing countries with solar training, testing, and research. We accelerate solar at scale and enable market readiness through an assessment of opportunities and viable business models. And we set up sustainable solar projects in countries most impacted by climate change, especially least developed countries and small island developing states. Our member countries drive change by enacting policies and regulations, sharing best practices, agreeing common standards, and mobilising investments that build viable market systems for generation, transmission, and distribution of solar power. Solar is the most accessible and cheapest form of renewable energy. The cost of solar technology is expected to decline even further, and demand is set to grow as people look for cheaper energy sources. As we evaluate what we could call the most bang for the post-COVID stimulus buck, microgrids emerged as an option that we should collectively get behind. On a more serious and somber note, we recognise the enormous impact that COVID has had on our members, including in the Pacific, and our thoughts are with those members in their efforts to combat the scourges of COVID. We hope today's webinar will be enlightening, informative, and inspiring. We're focused on ensuring that we're supporting our Pacific Island members in their solar journeys, while at the same time building back better post-COVID. We believe that solar has a tremendous role to play in building resilience, supporting energy access, and moving away from fossil fuels. And to this end, we look forward to working further with our Pacific Island members and with Pacific regional organisations, including the Secretariat of the Pacific Community and the Pacific Centre for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, to support the rollout of solar in the region. It's wonderful to have you all here today. I'll be handing over now to Mr. Solomone Fafita from the Pacific Centre for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, for him to begin and set the context for today's webinar. As a matter, just minor housekeeping, just to let you know that we'll have the Q&A session post presentation by Mr. Gaidon. And should you have any questions that you would like to ask him, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and he will endeavour to answer as many questions as he can. We do have a note, there is a limited time available and we may not be able to get to all. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. I'm sharing my screen and hope Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, but we've gone back to the Zoom page. Perfect.
That's perfect?
Yes, we can see the PowerPoint.
Okay, it's such an honor to be given the opportunity to set the scene for this webinar. This webinar has some special significance to the PICRI, given the fact that just yesterday we celebrated our 4th anniversary, whereby part of the events was the launching of the PICRI business plan for the next 10 years. And one of the program areas that the PICRI will be working on is on mini grids. So it's a wonderful feeling to be able to launch the business plan and then 24 hours later, we are launching this new partnership with ESA as well as INES and NREL through this webinar on microgrids. I think we are all working on the energy sector, and therefore we are all guided by the Sustainable Development Goals, of which for most of us, we are more related to Sustainable Development Goal 7. And you will note that in terms of the targets, by way of universal access to electricity, the world as a whole have been doing very well in terms of the progress. It's the same with the universal access to clean fuel and technologies for cooking, as well as in terms of increasing the share of renewable energy in the total energy mix. We can see that the world as a whole have made some progress on that. And I think we can all be proud, regardless of how big or how little our contribution is, but we are all contributing to the achievement of Sustainable Development Goal 7. If we look more closely to the Pacific Islands in terms of electricity access, we can see that there's still a lot of work to do in terms of accessing to electricity. If you look at the top 4 countries in Melanesia, Papua New Guinea, Fiji, Solomon Islands, and Vanuatu, it highlights that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of improving access to electricity. And it's pleasing also to note that there is increasing penetration of renewable energy into the total energy mix of Pacific Islands, as we can see the new capacity of renewable energy throughout the islands in 2019. It's also pleasing to note, if we look at the targets that countries have set themselves to achieve, and where they are right now, it just shows that there is still a lot of work to be done. And I think this is where microgrids come in terms of supplying electricity to our fellow citizens who don't have access to these priority needs. And of course, if we look at countries such as Tuvalu, we can see how significant the role of microgrids, or call it mini grids, in terms of supplying electricity to all its islands. And I'm pretty sure it's the same to all the islands throughout the Pacific. But of course, the whole world changed in March last year when COVID became a global challenge to the health of people in the world. And so there are adverse impacts of COVID. Here I show an example in Tonga where the achievement of their target has been deferred, given that the movements of technical experts and the transportation of materials have been affected due to the restrictions brought about by COVID. At the same token, jobs have been lost. Here in Fiji, the Prime Minister announcing the job losses. And so the welfare of families have been affected too. And it's no secret that in terms of the economic growth, and this is something I just got out of the news in Tonga, inflation has increased, exports have fallen, and lending have decreased. So the lives of people and their well-being have been adversely affected by COVID. But in the Pacific, we also have another challenge to deal with in terms of cyclones and natural disasters. This is in Tonga in 2014, Micronesia 2015, as well as in Vanuatu in 2015. How lives have been affected, infrastructure, renewable energy supplies have been affected by cyclone. So I guess these challenges where we are right now has given us the opportunity to relook at how we are doing things, particularly in terms of our electricity supply. And I'm just taking here the conclusion from the tracking report on SDG 7. They are saying that this is our reset moment. And definitely for the Pacific Islands, this is an opportunity for us to look at how we can recover better, how we can meet our electricity access and renewable energy targets, while at the same time become more resilient with our electricity supplies that are designed and managed by local expertise. We don't rely on foreign expertise who may not be able to visit countries during a time of travel restrictions. And of course, our people want reliable and cheaper electricity, which they can productively use to produce goods and services, thereby creating jobs and income. So with that, I'll leave it in here and then pass it on to Bruno to talk about microgrids. Thank you.
Malo, over to you, Bruno.
Thank you very much, Fiona, for the introduction. Thank you, Salomone, as well, for the setting up the scene. I hope you can see my screen now. Yes, full screen. Right. So I'm very glad to be here with you today. So good morning, good afternoon. For me, it's very early. It's 6 a.m. in the morning. And I hope that, okay, I need to change something. I hope you will understand and see my screen correctly. Now it is. Great. So my name is Bruno, and I have been working in the PV sector for the last 20 years. I work for an NGO in France, which is specialized in promoting photovoltaics. And I am also a trainer at the French National Institute of Solar Energy, so INES. And I do trainings on PV and especially large-scale PV systems. and my background is electrical engineering. What we will discuss today is microgrids, of course, and to discuss solar and microgrids, I will say a few words about most microgrids in operation in the world today, which are powered by diesel generator sets. And I will then give you some information about how to integrate PV systems into these microgrids. I will also say something about the added value of storage systems. And what I really want to share with you this afternoon, is a set of case studies of large-scale implementation of PV on some small islands. So I will show you 4 case studies, and I will conclude with a specific focus on the Tonga, because there's a lot going on there as well. And my objective, of course, is to give you as much information as possible on this subject. And to follow up on what Salomone just said, if we talk about microgrid and Pacific Islands, we need to start with tourism, and to highlight the importance of tourism in the local economy. And if you look at the share of the tourism industry in the gross domestic product of some Pacific islands in the Pacific, you see that this amount is very important. 10% for the Tonga, 20% for Samoa, and it is not specific to the Pacific. And we see similar figures in other islands in the world, and this can be up to 30% of the GDP in some Caribbean islands. So tourism is very important for the local economy. And as Salomon said, the local economy has been strongly impacted by COVID-19, because due to the restriction to travel, the lockdown, the quarantine at the border, this income has been strongly reduced. So it's a fact that needs to be taken into account when we discuss resilience and microgrid as well, and you will see the link with that. So back to the electric supply of islands, I just would like to remind that the most common way to produce electricity in small isolated territories, small islands, is to use diesel, and to use diesel in a specific engine that we call a diesel generator set, and that most commonly we call gensets. And you have here 2 examples of gensets for microgrid on 2 islands. On the left side, you have just one genset in one island in Indonesia, yes. And it's not very reliable just to have just one genset to power a microgrid. And this is why generally you have several gensets grouped in a building that form power plants. And you have on the right side of the screen a nice building with 4 big chimneys. And it means that within this building, you have 4 gensets, 4 diesel gensets to power the island. And you see on the background the power lines going through the island to supply the electricity to the inhabitants, to the customers. So this is to keep in mind that diesel is very mainstream everywhere in the world to supply, to generate electricity on islands. And why diesel gensets are mainstream? Just because they have many advantages. And among them, we can say that gensets are very cheap And this is why they are so cheap to install, and you will see the difference. So the capital cost necessary to pay them is very low. And also, gensets are very smart. It's a very smart device, and we call that grid forming generators. Grid forming mean that they can run alone. If you start a genset, then you can automatically power microgrids. So it's very easy. It's a plug and play device, very easy to use. And there's an internal control that automatically matches power production with the power consumption. So diesel generators are very smart. And you have here, so it's the consumption over a day of one island. And there's a basic microgrid, so it's the majority of the microgrids in the world. You have the loads and a microgrid, and you have a genset. And if the loads fluctuates over the day, then the genset will automatically adapt its power production to match the load. So it's very easy to use. But on the other hand, gensets have many disadvantages. And maybe the most important disadvantages that we can say today is that it's very expensive to operate. It's very expensive because you need to buy fuel, you need to buy diesel to make it run. And you will see that this is something very expensive. And the second problem that you face when you operate a diesel genset is the versatility of the diesel price. So the price of diesel is very volatile. So it means that it fluctuates over a day, a month, a period, and it's very difficult to plan how much the energy powered by diesel will cost in the future. And this is a problem for most operators of such gensets. And you can have also other difficulty to operate such a system, just related to the access, just to deliver the fuel, the diesel on site. Also, you will see that diesel has a high value since it is also used to run cars. And there is also an issue with the theft of diesel. And of course, there are high environmental impact with diesel due to the CO2 emissions. And very important as well is the relative low power quality of diesel gensets. So I will just say again some specific figures, information on that. So regarding the price of the electricity produced, so it's difficult to have a general price for 1 liter of diesel everywhere, but it's around, let's say, half US dollar. And as 1 liter is used to produce 3 kilowatt hour, you can just say that the fuel cost of 1 kilowatt hour of electricity produced by diesel is approximately 0.2 almost US dollar. And you need to add to this fuel cost the taxes, the delivery cost, then cost for operating the genset and the maintenance. And if you add all those costs, then you come to a power production cost, which is very, very high, up to 0.5 US dollar per kilowatt hour, and in some specific places, remote places, much more. So it means that actually the price of the energy produced by a diesel genset is quite high. And as I said, the price of diesel is versatile, and it's very difficult to plan and to say how much it will cost in the future. And this is also something very complicated for operators, since you need to plan, you need to to say to your customer how much it will cost. And with diesel, it's very difficult to say. Sometimes you have good news because diesel is very cheap, and sometimes you have very bad news because diesel is very expensive. So this is also something to have in mind. And despite the fact that the incomes from tourism have been reduced due to COVID-19, you still need electricity on the islands. You still need to run factories, to run your local appliances, your home appliances, to go to work, and whatever. And it means that you still need to use diesel, and all the value of diesel goes out of the island. So the income of the island has been strongly reduced, but the expenditure due to the import of diesel are still high. And this is imbalance in the local economy as well, due to the specific COVID situation. So here you see some example of diesel barrels coming on the island, in the Solomon Islands on the left, and you see storage of diesel barrels in the Fiji on the right. So, and this is why it's very also problematic because it can be stolen very, very easily, as I said, because diesel has a value to power cars. Regarding the environmental impact, as I said, 1 liter produces 3 kilowatt-hour of electricity. It means that to produce 1 electricity, you need 0.3 liters. 0.3 liter is a can. So with a can, you produce 1 kilowatt-hour. And this can of diesel generates approximately 1 kilogram of CO2 emissions. And this is why diesel gensets also have a strong environmental impact, and that we have to reduce also the use of diesel. And regarding power quality, so the main indicator that we can use to assess the quality of the power is the frequency. And here you have an example of the frequency of large interconnected grids on the mainland, and can be 50 hertz or 60 hertz. So you see that the line, the frequency line, is close to the nominal value. And when you use a genset, you have much more fluctuation on the frequency. And sometimes the frequency goes to 0 because the genset is off, just because of a technical problem, or because you need to maintain it and you have just one and no backup. And it means that with diesel genset, usually the frequency is not as good as what you can have in centralized grids. And this can also be a problem. This quality, low power quality, can also be a problem. And especially when you have a power outage, and it's something common in some territories. And it's a problem, it used to be a problem, and it's still a problem. And it's a special problem nowadays because with the vaccine and the electricity supply disruptions, you waste many vaccines every year. And this is why it's important to have a reliable power supply, especially when you have a specific, strong vaccine effort campaign. And this is a case actually, and this is why to keep the vaccine cold, you need also a very high power quality supply. So today it's also very important, and it will be important in the future. Okay, now back to solar. So now I will explain how we can integrate solar systems, photovoltaic system, into small island grids powered by diesel generators, gensets. So you have an example of a very nice PV system on a tourist resort in Bora Bora, and it's something that can be easily done. So it's a very easy to connect in parallel to a diesel microgrid, a regular PV system composed of PV modules and inverters, regular inverters. Regular inverters are made to produce electricity, to inject electricity into a grid. The grid needs to be stable, but it also works on microgrids as well. But it works everywhere, and it's easy to do, and there are many advantages with PV. You know, you don't need fuel to run a PV system except the sun, and on islands we have the sun shining almost every day, so it's made on purpose. You have low environmental impact for PV, low operating cost, and this leads to a very low production cost compared to a diesel. So it's difficult to say a price because it depends on the size of the PV system, but it's up to, so between, let's say, 5 and 20 US dollar cents per kilowatt hour. And also PV has a very high quality of the power delivered. So many advantages. But PV also do have disadvantages. And among the main disadvantages that we can mention this afternoon, is the high capital cost of PV. You need to invest in the PV system to make it run, and most of the cost is in the investment, so high capital cost. There's also a problem with the land use, and this could be a problem in some small island with just steep ground. And also, PV systems are grid following generators. It means they can't run alone, and they need other generators to run. And I will explain that as well. So this is the main disadvantages. I found a nice picture from the US Department of Energy of PV system in the US Virgin Islands in St. Thomas. And there are no flat grounds. And this is why the PV system has been installed in a very steep area. And sometimes in some islands, you don't have other places to install PV. So you have to find a space to put the PV modules. So it could be an issue in some of the islands as well. And in a diesel microgrid, there's a limit. You can't install as much PV as you want. And the technical limit comes from the gensets. And to keep the microgrid stable, you need to always run the genset at a power which is above 30% of its nominal power. And actually, this rule is the limit to install a PV system on microgrids. Otherwise, if you go down this 30% of the nominal power of the genset, you will negatively affect the units. So this is why it's recommended never to run a genset under 30% of its nominal power. And if you know this rule, you now understand that there's a limit hosting capacity of the microgrid for PV. And as you need to always run the genset at minimum 30% of its nominal power, then you can't install as much PV as you want on a microgrid to keep it stable. And on the generic load profile I show you, if I want to install as much PV as I can, then I come to this limit, and over a day, I will only cover 20% of the daily consumption. And this is more or less the limit that you have on diesel microgrid with only a PV system, so regular PV system. So you can go above this limit. And if you oversize the PV system, then due to the control system, the regulation, you will not produce more electricity, and you will curtail the production, and you will lose a lot of production just to keep the genset operate at its minimum 30% power. So that's a problem, and this is the limit of the hosting capacity of diesel microgrid. But there's a solution, of course, to overcome this limit, is to use storage system. And the users of storage system will bring many added value. The first added value that will be brought by storage is the improvement of the power quality of microgrids, because storage systems are what we call grid forming generators, so like gensets, and they can run alone on the grid, and they can power along the grid. And this is something very important and very useful for a solar system in order to increase the share of PV on a diesel microgrid. In terms of power quality, you see again the variation of the frequency of a genset with a power outage as well. And you see the stability of the frequency of a microgrid powered just by the battery. And actually, it is very much more stable than what we see on the screen. So it's very stable frequency with the storage. And it means that as the storage is a grid forming generator like gensets can be replaced by storage in case of power outage. And this replacement will also lead to a strong stabilization of the frequency. So this is why there are many added value to use a storage and to plug storage into a diesel microgrid. And once you have a full featuring microgrid with a genset, the loads, solar systems, and storage, then if the solar system is significantly important, and if the storage has a high capacity, you can have some situation where you will be able to switch off the diesel generator and to run the microgrid just with solar and storage. And this is what we call the diesel off mode that we can see in some microgrids, and that I will present you in detail this morning. And what happened is that with storage, you can oversize the PV system, and if you have excess of electricity of production, it will be used to store energy in the storage, and this stored energy will be injected into the microgrid at the end of the day, and once the battery will be empty, then the genset will be switched on again to supply electricity during night. And of course, if the storage is really important, then it will be able to deliver electricity along the night to have a full PV supplied microgrid. And on the very simple graph I display right now, you have a 6-hour period where the diesel genset is off, and with the storage and the PV, then you cover much more so a much more important share of the consumption with solar. And in that case, you have 40% of the daily consumption covered by solar, which is for some microgrids a very important share. So if we go back to a normal situation after the COVID crisis, islands will have back the income from tourism. And if a microgrid with solar and storage has been installed, then it will lead to a strong reduction of the diesel import expenditure, and all the value generated by the storage and the PV system will stay on the island. And this reduction of the diesel cost can then be used either to upgrade and maintain the grid, or to make the mini grid operate with a local skilled staff. So this is the very important added value of such a system, because the value stays on the island. And before I show you the case studies I want to present you, I will just give you one additional information about the main business models that we see around the world to make such projects happen. First, the most common one is what I call the investment business model. Is so very typical. You have the local utility, and the local utility will pay for the PV and the storage system. So this system is owned by the local utility. And in that case, the main challenge is to find a way to finance the capital cost, which will be necessary to build the storage and PV system. And to overcome this challenge, then you generally need support from national or international organizations just to cover the capital cost. So this is the main business model that we see in the world. But there are also another business model that we call PPA, which is also mainstream now, power purchase agreements. In that case, the local utility will just buy the energy, not the system, but just the energy produced by the PV plus storage system, which is owned by a private company. And in that case, the challenge is to find a private company that is willing to invest, to install the PV and the storage, and to offer an affordable price for the energy produced. So you have two main business models. Either the local utility owns the system, or either the utility buys the energy coming from the system. Now we can switch to the case studies. So I have selected 4 case studies well split around the world. And if we start from the west to the east, I will present you what has been done on Isabella in Ecuador, in Saint Eustatius in the Caribbean, on Robben Island in South Africa, and on Tokelau in New Zealand, the Pacific. So I start with Isabella. Isabella is one of the Galapagos Islands. It's the largest island of Galapagos, actually. And in the past, before the project, Isabella was 100% powered by diesel gensets to produce electricity, and the diesel consumption was a little bit more than 1 million liters a year. And you have the former powerhouse on the screen with, we can see just two of them, with the two gensets and the two chimneys of the powerhouse of the local utility, ELEC Galapagos. And what happened in Galapagos is something that unfortunately can happen everywhere, is that in 2001, the tanker Jessica got a shipwreck and generated a very important oil spill. And you see Jessica on the screen. And the problem is that the Galapagos are heritage listed area, so very sensitive with a lot of wildlife. And this is why after this oil spill, the Ecuadorian government decided to launch a zero fossil fuel initiative for the Galapagos Island, just to stop importing diesel in those islands. So this is the political decision by that time. And this led to a very, very nice project. This project, you have it on the screen. You see in the middle the former powerhouse with the gensets. And around the powerhouse, 1 megawatt peak PV system has been installed with storage. And this PV system and the storage covers now a third of the yearly consumption of the island, which is a lot. And the remaining production comes from biodiesel, which is made from a seed of one plant called jatropha. And now there are almost no diesel used in Isabella to produce electricity. You just have a mix of photovoltaic, solar photovoltaic, plus storage and biodiesel. And this made possible to cover, so with solar, a third of the yearly consumption of the island, which is already a lot. And the owner of the system is the local utility, ELEC Galapagos. And you see the savings on the screen, and we can come back to that after. Then the second case study I would like to present you today, it's one island of the Caribbean. It's a Dutch municipality that has different names. Statia is the most easy to pronounce. Sint Eustatius as well. It's a 21 square kilometer island. And Statia, so as almost all islands, we're also using diesel to produce electricity. And the island is much bigger, so the diesel consumption is also more important. And it was about 3.6 million liters a year. And you see the gensets of the island. And as it is a Dutch municipality, so the local government can compare the production cost on the mainland in Europe and on the island. And on Statia, the electricity production cost was 5 times more expensive than on the mainland. And this is why the Dutch government had to subsidize diesel to reduce the price of electricity on the island in this municipality. And this is not only the case for Netherlands. In France, it's exactly the same. We have to subsidize fossil fuel to make the electricity price acceptable in overseas territories. But The difference is that the Dutch government decided to stop subsidizing fossil fuel and launch a specific initiative to reduce the use of diesel to produce electricity. And this is why, with the support from the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs, a large photovoltaic system with a storage has been installed on Stasia. It's a 5 megawatt peak PV system with a large storage. And this PV systems plus storage covers almost, not fully, but almost half of the consumption of the island. The exact figure is 46%. And it's a project that has been done in 2017. So it's there are many documents, many reports on that project, and it's a very successful project that showed that even on not only very small island, but medium-sized island, you can produce a very important share of the yearly consumption with a PV system. And what was demonstrated on this second case study is what we call diesel off operation. The PV system is so important, and the storage is also so has a very important capacity that it's possible to switch off the diesel genset during several hours a day. And you have here a copy of the screenshot of the operating screen of the utility. The consumption of the island is 1.6 megawatts, and the PV produces twice more, so 3.3 megawatts. So the excess goes to the storage, and as PV has more important power than the consumption, so the genset is just off. And it was the first time this was demonstrated in the world, to switch off diesel gensets while PV and storage were just maintaining and powering the local grid, the microgrid. So this is why this second case study is very important and must be known if you want to duplicate such a project. Stasia, Netherlands. Then we can switch to South Africa. So on the screen you have a small island, which is unfortunately famous, Robben Island. Robben Island used to be a jail, and it's the place where Nelson Mandela has been jailed for many, many years. It's in front of South Africa. You see the town on the background of the screen, and it's like Isabella in Ecuador. It's a World Heritage territory, so and very specific, and it's a place where a lot of tourists used to come to visit the former prison. And this island is not connected to the mainland. It's a standalone system, it's a microgrid. And this microgrid used to be powered by a diesel generator, 0.5 megawatts, with a yearly consumption of diesel of 0.6 million liters a year. And the island is managed by a museum. It's a Robben Island Museum. It's a public entity. And the mission of this public entity, one of the missions, is to develop a responsible and sustainable tourism products and offer a unique visitor experience. In order to improve the sustainability of the tourist products, so coming and people are coming on the island, the Robben Island Museum decided also to launch a project and to switch from diesel to solar PV. And the Robben Island Museum installed a 0.7 megawatt PV system that you see on the screen as well, with a storage. And this system covers half of the power consumption of the island every year. So it's a very important share of the yearly consumption covered by PV with on this island. So it's a very successful project as well. And you see that the share of the consumption covered by PV is much more important, but 50% covered by PV, it's very important if you compare to what is happening elsewhere in the world. And I will finish before I say something about the Tongas with a case study from Pacific. It's an older project, maybe the first of its kind. Okay, just before the Pacific, just the evidence of the diesel off operation. So it's the curves, so very quickly. Just to show you that thanks to the PV system on Robben Island, you can have more than 9 hours a day without diesel now. So basically when the sun shines, the diesel generator is off and the island is powered with PV and storage. This was Robben Island in South Africa. And I will finish with Tokelau, which is a group of 3 very small islands, part of New Zealand. You see the 3 small islands. And as it is the case of most islands, once again, the 3 islands used to be powered with diesel generators. So in total, on the 3 islands, there was approximately 1 megawatt of diesel gensets and a yearly consumption of 0.3 million liters a year. And you have one of the powerhouse of one island on the screen. And the government of Tokelau decided to set up strategic action plan in 2004. And in this policy, there were two important points. The first one was the achievement of energy independence thanks to the use of local energy resources, such as the sun, and also the improvement of the electrical supply in order to provide high quality power and affordable power to all inhabitants. This was in 2004, and it was one of the first initiatives of that kind in the world. And this led to the installation of 3 PV system, 1 on each island, and you have 1 on the screen, and you see that land use is in that case an issue because there are limited space available on the 3 islands. And in that case, the PV system is so important, and the storage as well, that the share of the yearly consumption covered by PV is 90%. And this is I guess, the world record still now. And this is how now the 3 islands of Tokelau are producing electricity. And this is for me, one of the best case studies. And I will conclude now, because I think now time is over, just with 2 things about Tonga and the main island of Tonga, Tongatapu. So Tongatapu, on Tonga, there's also a roadmap, and the roadmap is to reduce the use of diesel as quickly as possible. So it's a very impressive policy. And on Tonga, there are already very large PV systems, actually 3 already in operation. And what is going on in Tonga right now is the installation of large-scale storage system. It's project, sorry, it's a project undertaken by a French company that we know well here, Akuo, and the large storage system is under commissioning, and the objective of Tonga is, of course, to operate the microgrid with a diesel-off operation, and this will be tested. It's under test, or it will be tested in the coming days. So just as a conclusion, photovoltaic can be a very good solution to power small islands. There are many environmental benefits as it reduces the risk of oil spill and the amount of CO2 emissions. There are many social benefits. It improves the quality of supply and with less power outage. And you can train local people because you need skilled staff to operate and maintain solar microgrids. Then there's many economic benefits as well, because the value generated stays on the island to maintain and upgrade the grid. And last point, very important, is that what is going on small islands paves the way for a large-scale integration of PV into larger island grids, and as well into large interconnected grids on the mainland. And this will be my conclusion. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Bruno. And thank you again, Solomoni, for such a fantastic and informative session today. As flagged earlier, we'll now be opening up to a short Q&A session. I can see we've already got some questions in the Q&A chat box, so thank you very, very much. Should you also wish to ask a question in person, please raise your hand using the raise hand function, and we'll try and accommodate that as well. Bruno, I will now hand back to you to start looking at some of the Q&As, if that's possible.
We try.
Thank you.
So far, no. Okay, maybe, all right. Okay, so maybe the first one, low power quality from a diesel genset. I'm not clear on that. Any further explanation? Yes. If you run a small genset, and if you plug a device on the genset, then the genset has to match the power, and the frequency will fluctuate, and this is what we call a low power quality. It will affect the frequency, and the largest the power production is, the lowest the effect is. So this is especially the case for a very small genset and small microgrids, diesel microgrid. So it's a problem of the capacity of the engine to match the power consumption. So I can't say more. Okay, so okay.
Bruno, we might just cut quickly to a live question that we've got
Yes.
a hand raised for. So His Excellency, the Honorary Consul for the Kingdom of Tonga is with us, and I see he has his hand raised. Your Excellency. We might. Your Excellency, Honorary Consul, we might come back to him. Yeah, perhaps, Bruno, we might continue with the chat questions.
Or maybe there is a question about the Netherlands, but Stasia is a Dutch municipality, but it is located in the Caribbean. So it's not an island close to or located in Europe. It's very far away from Netherlands, and it's in Caribbean. It's overseas territory. So it's even if it's a municipality, it's very far away from Netherlands, and it's located in Caribbean. And what happened in Netherlands? I'm not the one to to say exactly to say more about that.
Bruno and Fiona, maybe I can jump in on the question about slide number 29. Yeah, I think it depends on a case-by-case basis and the size and the location of the project, but certainly it's something that people will have to look at, compare your imports of fossil fuel with your imports of PV systems too. So, but we can't say any real answer in terms of net savings of foreign exchange right now. You have to look at that when you decide on your actual project, the capacity, the location. And then certainly it's part of those things that you look at when you do a feasibility study. And you look at the the savings in fossil fuel compared to the increased imports of solar systems, batteries, etc. Thank you.
So if I can add something on that, what we can say is in such feasibility studies, the conclusion is always that producing electricity with PV is much more cheaper, so cheaper than producing electricity with a diesel genset. And as I said, to produce 1 kilowatt hour with a diesel genset is approximately $0.5 US, and to produce 1 kilowatt hour with a PV, it's 0.2. So it's much cheaper, but the difference is that with PV, you need to invest in the system, so you have a high capital cost, whereas for a diesel genset, you will spend this money all along the time when you use it, because in that case, it's the operating cost that is more important. But in all cases, producing electricity with PV, it's always cheaper than producing electricity with a small genset.
Bruno, we've got time for a couple more questions if there's any others that you're able to answer in the time available.
How does digital power supplies like battery compare to mechanical? So there's also yeah. Okay, no, there's a question. I would have thought that infrastructure is more impactful. Actually, in all the projects I mentioned, so the infrastructure stays the same. The main difference between before and after is the way to operate the grid. You need more control. So the control system is more complex because in the past you just had to switch on the genset and let it go. And now with the PV and storage and the diesel, so you have a complete set of control systems that will do it automatically. But the control system is more complex, but there are many solutions to achieve this. And once it is, let's say, correctly set up, it will also run alone. But the control system is the main difference between before and after. And in terms of infrastructure, let's say there's no change. Okay, and maybe a last one. How does digital power supplies like battery compare to mechanical? So if you look at the monitoring data of some projects, you see that digital power supply are very, very good in terms of power quality compared to small mechanical generators. And there may be an issue with the inertia. So I see that someone is raising the issue on the chat. But there have been many tests and many discussions regarding the inertia of mechanical generators. And with grid forming inverters, such as the battery system with an inverter, then we can duplicate the inertia also in digital grids. So it should not be an issue, and at least it's not an issue in the existing small grids fully supplied with digital systems several hours a day, like in the project I have displayed today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bruno. Honorary Consul, do you have a question for us today?
Well, I don't have a question. I have a suggestion. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Honorary Consul.
Thank you very much for organizing this timely webinar, and with special focus to small island countries. You know, I think this is second such webinar. I must congratulate the ISA and other hosts for organizing this. I have a small suggestion that for these places where these in small island countries where they've successfully implemented these PV sort of solar systems in diesel. If site visits of from island countries can be arranged by under the auspices of PICRI and other hosts, you know, just as a sort of visit to these places, you know, maybe intra-island countries, you know, like in the Pacific, or maybe in the like in Caribbean and all, where successful these I mean, they are already operating successfully, but if these systems are operating successfully. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorary Consul. And what I can say in regard to that is that I know that this is one of the areas in which we are very keen to ensure that we play a strong role in facilitating cooperation and the exchange of knowledge and information sharing between small island developing states, as well as between members more generally. It's really important that the very positive experiences of countries are shared to help others replicate and scale up. It's also very important that some of the difficulties that countries have had are also shared as well, so that countries can respond to issues that they themselves are facing or avoid other issues that might come their way. I know that our colleague, Dr. Philippe Malbranche, is working on preparing case studies, and would very much like to hear from any attendees today with examples and case studies that they're willing to share, so that these can be published and circulated to our members more generally. Going forward, I would love, and I'm sure we would love to see actual in-person site visits, and to be able to facilitate that exchange of information and that knowledge sharing on a more less virtual manner. Unfortunately, I think we will have to wait and see what the post-COVID landscape looks like. But I think as an aspiration, it's something we definitely could and should be working towards.
Maybe I can say something in there
Yes,
to the
so
honorary council and Malolele Sahai, and thank you so much for that excellent suggestion. From Pickery side, this is the phase of the cooperation with ESA, and certainly we would be pleased to look at progressing the cooperation and jointly support site visits where people can visit and actually see and touch and smell and look at success projects on the ground. I'm pretty sure my colleagues who are tuning in from Mamau are supportive of the suggestion, and certainly they would benefit from experiences in other small island states with regards to microgrids. Thank you.
Thank you, Solomone. Thank you, Honorary Consul. Yes, Bruno, over to you.
I think, sorry, Fiona, but Alexander wrote a question in the chat that I can easily answer as well. It's a question regarding the diesel reduction in example 1 in Isabela in Ecuador, and the difference between the share of the consumption powered by PV and the reduction of diesel is that the diesel is not used for the remaining production, but they use biodiesel, and this is why you can't find the correct figures. So they use biodiesel instead of regular diesel, and this is why the reduction of regular diesel is much more important than the share of the consumption covered by PV, by photovoltaics. This is what the question raised by Alexander. I hope this is clear now.
Thank you, Bruno, for that clarification. I think at this point, given the time, I might hand over now to Solomone again, talk about the topics, or potential topics, I should say, for future webinars. As he has mentioned, this is the first of what we hope will be a number of webinars and a number of activities between the ISA and Pickery. and we're delighted to be able to progress this further. As he will no doubt explain, we're very keen to hear, and we wanted to thank everyone who completed our survey pre-webinar on topics for future webinars. And I'll now hand over to Solomone to talk about that further. Solomone, perhaps you might be on mute. We're having a bit of trouble hearing you.
Sorry about that. As part of the registration process, people were asked a survey to identify priority areas where PICRI and ESA, as well as our partners INES, as well as NREL, will conduct further training based on the identified preferences. And the 5 areas that were mentioned in the survey were mobility and electric transportation on islands, clean energy microgrids, operation and maintenance of mini-grids, and clean energy to support water systems and agriculture. And lastly, integrated green growth and green energy system strategies and policies. In terms of the answers that we got up to now, there was some strong preference to have a webinar on clean energy to support water systems and agriculture, followed by integrated green growth and clean energy system strategy and policy. And then mobility and electric transportation on islands, followed by clean energy microgrids on islands. Unfortunately, in terms of operation and maintenance of mini-grids, the responses that we have to date, that's the area where we got the least responses too. But it would be good to hear from participants, particularly those from the Pacific Islands, in terms of your preferred topic, where ESA and PICRI and the partners will try to design the next webinar. Certainly, this is just an introduction that we have today. We are not able to cover everything, but at least a little bit of introduction to microgrids. And I think in terms of the questions that we have heard, we can tell there the differences in the interest on the topic, but perhaps some responses from you on the preferred topics will assist us and guide us in the future webinars that we will conduct. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Solomone. On behalf of the International Solar Alliance, I would very much like to thank, firstly, our 2 presenters today, Solomone from PICRI and Bruno from INES. We very much appreciated your insights, your thoughts, and the time taken to be with us today. I know, given the time difference for both of you, the timing has been less than ideal. It's late for Solomone and it's early in the morning for Bruno. So given that, it's even more appreciated that you were able to join us today and to be able to share your insights. Thank you as well to everyone who participated, both in our pre-webinar survey, in the Q&A, and just by being here today. We very much appreciated it, and we are most grateful for your attendance. We'll be in touch for future webinars on solar, building a brighter future. And we thank you again for your attendance. Given these COVID times, please stay safe and well and look after yourself. And we look forward to working with you to deploy solar, both in the Pacific and more globally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bimal and Rajendra, can we please finish the webinar here? Thank you.
Hello, Peter Solomon and your team in Pikri and our friends in Babao, from Babao, for attending this. Good to meet you. Last, I couldn't meet you
Nice
last.
to see you again.
During my last visit to Tonga, I couldn't see you. I mean, meet you rather. I think that schedule was very tight.